to our weekly Monday chats with Heather Wells. This is Brain Balance Live. I'm Jen, busy mom, working mom of 3, and one of my kiddos is a brain balance kiddo. And I just cannot tell you how invaluable the advice that you will get from Heather will be to your daily lives and your daily routine. So everybody say hi to Heather. Hi, Heather.
Hi, Jen. Hey, everyone.
How are you hanging in there, Heather?
The sun came out. I didn't know if it had gone bye-bye, but it's out today. It exists.
That is good. Yes, you were right before we started. Heather said it's a dark, and then it started our show. So was that what you were going to say? The room felt a little dark at the beginning there?
Yes, I don't know why it's so dark, but anyway, it's all good.
Well, now the sun is out and we are here, and today we are going to be talking about math struggles and math anxiety with Heather. And we're just going to go through, she's going to give us lots of, I've peeked at the notes, and there's going to be lots of advice here. And just to remind everybody, Heather is a certified cognitive specialist. She is a therapist. She is the National Autism Summit speaker. And also we've had a new honor bestowed. Are we allowed to talk about the new honor, or do we have to hold that one close to the vest?
I've been holding that close to the vest for months until this program was approved. So when I told you that, it was when I was allowed to say it.
Oh my goodness. Well, do you want to let our viewers in on what that new program is?
Well, Harding University, which is where I got my first degree, is starting a doctoral program in organizational leadership, and they reached out and asked me to be on their advisory board, and I accepted.
So we are giving Heather a big round of applause. Huge honor. So excited for you. And, you know, she spends all of her time, her life is dedicated to helping families, and now you're just going to help more people. So that's amazing.
No, it's a huge honor. I'm really excited, and it's going to be such a great program and equip future leaders.
I love that. Well, without further ado, let's get into our topic for today, Heather, unless there's anything else you wanted to say. It's been just such a whirlwind of a time opening your new center and things. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we get into our topic?
I don't think so. I'm really glad to talk about this today because there are so many struggles that lead to math issues that aren't actually about math. We're going to talk about some of the things that are about math. We're going to talk about a lot of things that will probably surprise some people that aren't about math. And I thought we would start with math anxiety. 25% of students have math anxiety, and it doesn't matter whether they're good at it or not. So these are for the whiz kid math students and for those who are struggling. Ability level there's no statistically significant difference in math anxiety. So
That's
I think it's
so interesting. And math is different than other subjects?
Yes. I mean, math is such an abstract concept, except in the early grades. You know, some kids struggle from the beginning. I mean, learning their numbers and counting and learning how to add and subtract. Others fly through that stuff. We're learning the building blocks, learning those details, memorizing those is a strength for them. And then math is cumulative. And you get to the point where, hey, you're supposed to apply it and use it abstractly, and then it falls apart. Yep. So, but the thing is, just anxiety in general, but since we're talking about math today, if I am ruminating on anxious thoughts, I may not do on this test. I don't know what I'm doing. What if I don't remember? That fills up my cognitive capacity, and I have less room to actually think about the math itself. And so a lot of careless errors come from this. A lot of just kids not, you know, a lot of times you're like, they were ready for the test and they test poorly. That doesn't mean there's not an issue. That maybe there's not a math issue, but why are they anxious about it? That suggests something else. So here are some tips. I wanted to get started because this applies whether your kids are good at math or struggling. Be involved. I mean, I know Captain Obvious there, but we don't want to do things for our kids. We want to equip them. We talk about creating independent problem solvers. What is math? It is reasoning through problems. It is precision and paying attention to details in a necessary way, which a lot of times kids with ADHD are thought to be poor with details, but really that tends to be a strength for them, but they're sloppy with the details or don't know which details to attend to at a given time. But there's a lot of research that says if you will spend 10 minutes a day with them, they can become proficient in math. It's not like I'm a math person, I'm a not. That's a very fixed mindset. We've always talked about the power of yet and talking about when you do hard things, your brain grows. So encourage that growth mindset. If they get bad papers, marks on their papers, that might really hurt their self-esteem, because they might be, I am the equivalent of what I got on this test. So it's really good to talk about. A test is simply feedback, kind of helping put it in perspective for them.
I absolutely love that wording.
Yeah, it's really powerful, because it is not an indictment on you as a person. It is not saying you can't do math. It is feedback and shows us where we can improve. A growth mindset. What would a person with a growth mindset do? We did a whole segment on that, but I wanted to share that feedback thing because that's really powerful. So it's not indicative of your potential. And when they understand your brains are pliable, they're plastic, they grow just like a muscle. You exercise muscles, they get stronger. You practice math, it gets better. And today you'll know what kind of help to give your kids depending on what their struggles are. And here's something very interesting. There are a lot of people in the world who don't like math. There's some who love it. There's a whole lot. If one thing we don't want to say is, yeah, I hated math too, or something like that, that sounds like I'm connecting with them and I'm empathizing, whereas if you talk about, yeah, I know it can be hard sometimes, but keep that growth mindset thing going. If they think you hate math or you don't see the point of it, that is predictive of their attitude toward math and achievement in math. So we want to keep it really positive and have some discretion on what you say. If they think you hate it as much as they do, it gives them a quote unquote right to hate it. And that changes their attitude about it and the effort they'll put into it.
That's a great note in regards to when we're empathizing with our kids, because so often that is a tactic that we use, right? Like, oh, I know how it feels to feel this way.
You can still empathize with their frustration and talk about something, but not, oh yeah, I hate math too. Yeah. I don't know why you have to know this. But
that's the best. I really don't use that. I don't know.
And being aware that there are a lot of stereotypes out there. I think a lot of us as adults know there are jokes about, and of course some men watch this, and that's not a joke, it's real. But I get teased all the time about, and it's just in joke, joking around. I know you can't do, kind of like pat me on the head. You can't do math. You're a girl. We got to realize that a lot of our kids have difficulty knowing jokes and sarcasm and humor, and they might take that to heart. And so, people, oh, you're from this culture, so you're going to be good at math. That puts a lot of pressure on. We got to be really careful and understand that we may know that's a stereotype and not always true. We don't really want to live in stereotypes and cognitive biases. But kids pick up on that starting at a very, very young age on any topic of bias. And so there is absolutely no truth. I mean, research has looked at this. It's not math. Boys are not better at math than girls. But I think the big note here is knowing that kids may take that to heart. Yeah. And even if they don't hear it from you, they may hear it from classmates. So when they're frustrated, don't think it's worth the effort talking through why they think that. You might uncover some biases, things they've heard from other people, even if they were joking, and they might have been serious. It might be another kid who took what their parents said seriously, or a classmate or something. We've talked about this so many times, I won't spend time on it, but make math relevant to real life. This is so boring. When am I ever going to use this? Checked out. Remember, boredom is registered in the brain as stress, and that means my fight or flight goes, and I start being very reactive and not in my logical brain. But we've talked about having them use math to cook, have them use it to calculate how long they have to save up to buy what they want. If they're saving allowance for something, calculate, they're excited to go see grandma and calculating things along the trip, how much it's going to cost if we go this far, and this is what gas costs, and we're going to stay at hotels, and see the money sense in it. Point out intentionally when you're using it in real life, apply it to hobbies they have. Math is everywhere. We use it all the time. We use it at the grocery store when we're looking at, okay, this is this many ounces and this is this many ounces. Which one is more per ounce? But be intentional about pointing that out. And why should they care about that? Well, when they're smart shoppers, they can get more of the things they want, or they can save more for what they want, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And baby steps, meet them where they are. We're going to talk about how getting them further along. with middle school students, we're going to talk about things to do. We don't need to review things they've got down pat, but finding where those holes are, but not expecting them to go from 0 to 100 on this. It does take time. It takes a lot of work to get there, but anybody can learn math. Allow mistakes. That's part of growth mindset and talking about what you've learned from mistakes, but also, I shared this on another show, but it applies very much to math. Focus on them learning the concepts, the reasoning skills, the problem, identifying what the problem is, finding ways to a solution. We grow brain pathways even when we get the wrong answer. We're growing those analytical problem-solving pathways. Look for what they did better than last time. Look for progress. Look for strategies they're using and praise them on those. That is just as essential to the process as getting the correct answer. And we're going to talk about how to learn the basics. There is a lot of research suggesting that over 50% of middle school students are still not proficient in some of the number sense, the math basics, knowing their times tables and so forth. If kids don't know the basics, again, that fills up their cognitive capacity. I have to think about what 8 times 6 is. That takes up part of my load, where a child who knows that has all of their attention to go toward the new part of what they're learning. So, all right, I wanted to start out with that because 1 out of 4 kids struggle with that, and this applies to all ages. All right, we can move on. So here is a summary, and then I'm going to start breaking this down. But dyscalculia is the learning disability that a lot of kids get labeled with who have difficulty with basic arithmetic, math facts. Below the age of 5, they may have difficulty learning to count, making estimates, spatial reasoning, reading time on clocks if they're having difficulty telling time, comparative judgments of size, big, bigger, biggest, identifying symbols. But notice this, it often co-occurs / is a symptom of other learning differences. Just because your child has a diagnosis of dyscalculia still does not mean that that is the root issue. When I did a show a while back about auditory processing, why can't my child follow instructions? And we talked about language and auditory processing. 95% of learning disabilities, learning differences are due to executive functions and or language issues that all can lead to these same struggles, along with some of the sensory stuff we're going to look at today. So is it actually math, or is there something underlying it? Okay.
Yeah.
Dyspraxia. What's the best approach to solve this problem? Showing the steps to solve a problem. How many of you have kids who can do the math in their head and they get counted off because they didn't show their work? There is, I have never known a child who refused, and I mean of any age, teens, little ones, in between, who didn't want to show their work, who could do it, no problem. And that may seem, well, they came up with the right answer. Some kids are so smart with certain parts of math that they don't really know how they got there. Or the act of handwriting is so laborious that if they write it down, they may get it wrong because they can't line up their columns. They have to think about forming the numbers. That might indicate another struggle.
Yeah.
So that's very important.
I find that Roger does a thing where it's almost like he gets so far ahead in his head with the math problem that he writes the numbers in the wrong place. Like the number that should have been on the top of the fraction, he writes as the whole number. And then the number that should have been the whole number is the numerator in the fraction. And I'm like, you did the right things, but you did it all in your head and you wrote them down in a different order than is typically taught. And so it looks wrong, but you actually did something right, you know?
Yes. And see, kids who sometimes show the work and come up with the wrong answer get rewarded for showing math reasoning because that's how important that is deemed in the educational system. And it is important, but it sometimes punishes the kids who are math whizzes who struggle with writing it out. But if they are struggling with writing it out, there are reasons why. It is not refusal to do it. That is very important to note. Dyspraxia is part of our sensory motor system. It's a motor planning issue. If I have difficulty with motor planning, I also have difficulty planning the steps to solve this, to know how to get started, to know which order to do the steps in, where the number goes, etc. Dysgraphia and dyslexia, difficulty with writing and read. Most people know what dyslexia is. It is language and auditory processing based, but you know that they may flip letters. If it's 27, they may put 227 or leave a number out, write them 27 as 72, etc. And so the same issues that they have in reading often apply to math also. But just because that happens doesn't mean they have dyslexia. Visual perception and processing and visual motor integration, using my eyes and my fine motor to write things down. Visual motor integration, there is a plethora of research about how predictive that is of both reading and math success years down the road. And this sloppiness, columns are all over the place. So I do the calculation right, but I'm adding the incorrect numbers. I carry my 1 in the wrong place. A plus sign can look like a time sign. Story of my life when I was little. Reading tables, because if your eyes are skipping around, you read one thing and then you're on a wrong column and you're not getting the correct information. Maps, all that orientation stuff. Because visual perception and processing requires my sense of being upright and balanced. If I don't know where I am in space, I don't get map concepts oftentimes. I used to skip problems all the time, and I'm like, I'm not a careless person. Why did I do that? My eye skipped right over it. It's very good for kids with visual perception and processing issues to cover everything but one problem at a time with white paper or something like that, to have a very blank surface underneath so they don't have visual fray underneath, or to outline each problem in very thick black magic marker or something so their eyes don't jump around, that kind of thing.
Smart, yeah.
Body awareness, equilibrium, both are very tied to where am I in space. Visual is very tied to equilibrium. So all of these can lead to issues with spatial concepts. Maybe I could memorize times tables all day long when I was young, but man, why is this triangle the same as this one? Well, I couldn't tell the difference in angles. I didn't know if those were the same triangles, just oriented differently, or two completely different types of triangles. It wasn't an inability to comprehend the concept. It was that I don't visually perceive that, so I cannot meaningfully learn that information. And that will definitely play out in geometry, much more than algebra, although it can still affect algebra if your eyes are skipping around. ADHD. Now, is it ADHD or is it auditory processing or language that they have difficulty following directions, understanding the explanations of the teachers? In ADHD, it's not inability to understand. It's that, oops, I wasn't paying attention. I got distracted. I didn't know which thing to attend to. With ADHD, there's a lot of impulsivity. That does not mean sometimes do kids rush through their work because they don't want to do it? Of course. But if they're good at something, they usually want to do a good job. They may be struggling, but that is an executive function skill, to pause and think through the entire problem. What is being asked of me? That is a cognitive skill, not carelessness when that happens. They do make careless errors sometimes because of sloppiness with details, but fine motor skills are also very tied to ADHD. Most kids with ADHD have more trouble with the big picture. What is the end game here? What is it I'm solving? They can probably spout off all kinds of details, even though they're sloppy with them when they write them down. Working memory, I've got a whole slide on that, so I'll save that. All kinds of executive functions. Susceptibility to anchoring effects. This is important. Y'all know that a lot of math problems are trying to trick you. So there will be numbers that are repeated throughout a problem. Guess what? That is very sticky in the mind of many ADHD students. Oh, that's got to be the thing right there that helps me solve this. They do that on purpose because part of the skill is ignoring irrelevant information and honing in on what you need to solve the problem. So really coach them on stopping first and thinking, what is being asked of me? And block out all those numbers that show up repeatedly until unless it comes to a point they know they need those numbers. That is a big thing that gets kids with ADHD who understand math, but then it looks like they're having struggles there. Auditory processing, I've talked about this a lot in many shows, but processing speed. Do they have slow cognitive tempo, which is a separate thing? Can they hear with background noise? Do they need earplugs? Does extraneous noise vastly change their performance? Localizing sound. Oh, that's in the hallway. I'm going to tune that out, hone on what the teacher's telling me. Taking notes. Taking notes involves language, auditory processing, working memory. Remember, working memory is problem-solving memory. I'm listening to the teacher. I'm holding that in mind while I take notes. So I have to pay attention to the notes I'm taking and keep listening to what she continues to say. and I'm applying it to the math formula that I learned yesterday. There's a lot to that. So look at how many of these things aren't actually about number sense.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's so true.
And this is not even an exhaustive list, but it's all that would fit on a slide. And I thought it got the idea across.
Yeah. I feel like that impulsivity too, that quick movement, it's so hard to get them to slow down sometimes.
Yeah, that is a cognitive skill. It is part of regulation. Regulation is one of the very first executive functions that starts growing in infancy. And kids often have difficulty with emotional regulation and or regulating what to attend to, regulating that brake pedal to slow down and take my time and think through this. Yeah. That is a skill that many kids are lacking with or without ADHD.
Yeah.
So we've talked about spending time with your kids 10 minutes a day doing this stuff. But guess what? If your kids are struggling learning these math facts, we don't start with flashcards. What? Counterintuitive. Here we go again with my counterintuitive note here. Memorizing information is ineffective until after a student has learned a concept. You're like, well, learning the flashcards is learning the concept. It seems so, right?
It seems so.
But here's the deal. At all grades, whether we are talking about pre-K all the way through high school, college, the brain works from the concrete. What can I see, smell, touch, feel, taste? That's sensory motor. If I have any sensory motor challenges, I have difficulty with the concrete, right?
For sure.
Then it moves to representational. How can it be depicted in pictures? Can I draw a picture of it? Like I'm learning the number 2 and I put 2 stickers to make eyes for an animal I'm drawing. That's representational. Abstract is the flashcard. Those are numbers. What does that line, swirly thing mean? It says 5, but 5 what? What is 5? That is abstract. So if we start with flashcards, we are starting with the abstract, which is the last stage of the process. Once they understand what 5 means, I have put 5 beads in a row for this bracelet I'm making. I have stacked 5 Legos on top. I have counted out 5 carrots, 1 for each person sitting at the dinner table. I know what 5 means. I manipulate it. I play with it. I touch it, feel it. Now the number on that flashcard means something, and I know what the concept of addition is. I know what division is. Now I can drill those things because I get what that card means. I don't just memorize 10, 6. Yeah. A lot of kids can memorize that, but then it comes to a word problem. I don't really know what that means. So it's not on that flashcard. So I can't generalize it to a real application. And that's why kids say, when am I ever going to use this? I'm not going to be carrying around flashcards when I'm 30 and doing flashcard. That is why that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So here are some super fun things to do to get that number sense there. This has to be there. And that frees up the mind to focus on all the new stuff. Math is cumulative. Over 50% of middle school students aren't automated on this stuff. The more automated we are on the basics, the more capacity we have to learn the new. Madeforfun.com, 15 math. It says 15 math facts. I copied that straight from the website. It's 15 fun ways to work on math and get these skills that don't involve flashcards. I mean, it's creative Jenga that is like whiteboards on the Jenga things. It's Legos, it's stringing beads. It's very fun stuff. It's a super cool site to check out. And it's really geared towards tweens and teens, but there are definitely things you can adjust for the young. I mean, little ones play with blocks. There's a lot of research that if you are playing with blocks with your kids, you intentionally talk about spatial concepts. I'm putting this one on that one. I'm putting this one beside that. They start growing spatial when you're intentional about using those words.
Oh, yeah. And those, even like the Lego sets, when you're doing them together, it's like, oh, it's on the 3rd row of dots. And
that's right. That's exactly right. And now the next 3 are apps. They are some of the best maps.
That too.
And then those last 3 are websites. Education.com has a lot of resources. That one's geared more for younger kids. They have games on there that you can play free, as well as worksheets and stuff. But making it engaging is a better way to go usually.
For sure.
Math X Lines, I have to give a big shout out to this one. I think this is my favorite because, like, if you're working on addition and you're trying, okay, the sum you need to reach is 10, and you have a 3 ball, you aim it toward the 7 ball to equal 10. I'm sorry, cool. I love that. Kids love that.
That's awesome.
Crazy Taxi is another good one. And it uses it with monetary value, but that one does have ads. That requires a subscription to not have like 5 minutes of ads. So just heads up on that. But fun ideas that replace the flashcards until they get the concept. And then that's a good way to drill at home.
That's awesome. These are such great resources. Thank you.
Yes. I thought we got short time, so let me give you resources and y'all check them out.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about the spatial planning that can come into play with the dyspraxia, with visual perception and processing issues. We're talking about the brain processing what the eye see, not the eyes not seeing. So, body awareness, equilibrium. If kids don't know where they are in space, how are they going to understand spatial concepts? So it is very good idea. Like on the left, you can see this. They learn, like if they're space invaders or they bump into things, they seem clumsy. They also need to understand space on paper. And so you start with the car and you're connecting the cones, but none of the lines can overlap and they can't go through any of the pictures. That requires planning, spatial planning. That's a huge math skill. You are working on math when you do this. Another thing is like you see this graph paper and you can have a blank graph paper right beside it and have them copy it. They're having to count the dots. They're using spatial planning to make their picture look like that. You can get ones that are much less complicated. Yourtherapysource.com is a great site to get all kinds of spatial planning, visual motor integration, visual perception and processing, body awareness stuff. That is a fantastic site.
That is so awesome. You know what's funny? My mother-in-law got us something years ago, and I didn't realize this was what it was practicing, but it was like it had all these colorful beads and all these divots in it, and the glass over it.
Yes.
And then you pick up with the magnet and you try to copy the picture, and you have to count the dots and make the picture.
Yes.
That's exactly what this is practicing.
This requires self-regulation, attention to detail, seeing the big picture. Do the big pictures match? Visual motor integration. You're using fine motor and visual. That is what you use throughout all of school. Very indicative of all kinds of academic achievement. Not to mention you need it for driving and playing sports and everything you do in life.
Yeah.
And cooking. What is missing in the pattern? A lot of kids have difficulty with patterns. So like on the very bottom here, you see a little squiggly, one that's more squiggly. There's a blank. What goes in that? What's missing? There's all kinds of patterns you can do where they fill in the missing pattern. Visual memory is an issue for a lot of kids with visual perception issues. They may have excellent memory in all kinds of ways, but they have more difficulty remembering what they see. Top right there, you see those different diamond patterns.
Yeah.
They can just copy it, kind of similar to this colorful one, or you fold that, you have them study it for 10 seconds or so, fold the paper in half and have them do it from memory. Now you're working on that visual memory component, which is very important, and that helps them start remembering shapes and so forth. Tangrams, like in the bottom, all kinds of puzzles, tracing, doing mazes. All of those are excellent for working on these skills, and they are foundational for math. Okay, amazing. Let's move on. There's so many things. I was just trying to give a sample.
No, it's so great.
Okay, y'all. Please excuse dear Aunt Sally. This is a mnemonic. Mnemonics, everybody knows that helps a lot with things that are difficult. A lot of our kids struggling with math, and you kind of alluded to this with Roger. Math requires a ton of executive functions. If I want to look at the top thing there, 3 + 6 × 7. What's the correct answer to that? If I don't know the rules about the order of operations, somebody might say, I like adding first, or you always go left to right. So I'm going to do 3 + 6 is 9, 9 × 7 is 63. However, if I know math operations, multiplication comes before addition. So 6 × 7 is 42, + 3 is 45. Yeah. Completely different answer. A child can do all of the operations correct, but if they don't know the rules or they can't slow down, they have trouble with planning and sequencing, that becomes an issue.
Yeah.
Knowing when to go left to right. I don't even know left from right because that's body awareness.
Yeah.
So the way you remember this, please excuse my Aunt Sally. Please stands for parentheses. Anything in parentheses comes first. Will your kids know that's parentheses, or might they think it's an incomplete 6? That happens a lot, like with visual perception issues. Then excuse, exponents. That's like if you see 6 and then you see like a 2 or a 3 or 4, real small beside it in the upper right.
Yeah.
If it says 6 to the second power, that means you multiply 6 times 6. If you see 6 to the third power, 6 times 6 times 6. It's a shorthand for multiplying it a bunch of times. So you do parentheses, then exponents. My dear, multiplication and division comes next. They're tied in importance. And then Aunt Sally, addition and subtraction are tied. That is the order you do these. So look at this. Your kids may not know this, and they may not have a difficulty with the math operation. But if they're solving something and they're like, I don't know what to do first, because I did the parentheses, I did the exponents, but multiplication and division is in this question. How do I know what I do first? On those cases, you always go left to right. Yeah. So that's the next rule. But imagine how kids with planning, and that's also something they need to remember. So there's a memory component, knowing which part of the equation to pay attention to, noticing all of those symbols. Some kids get overwhelmed with the symbols and like, man, numbers are bad enough, and now you're throwing X's in math. What's up with that? Now there's these weird squigglies, because brackets and parentheses are the same in math. So I'm trying to give y'all things to look for. If you're seeing wrong answers and you always go left to right, does that come up to the right answer? Okay, they don't know order of operations. And this is a super quick fix for them. Okay.
That's right. And you've got this picture of Aunt Sally. So like it helps remind you.
Who can forget Aunt Sally? I love her hair. She got it going on.
She does.
All right. Working memory. Y'all have heard me talk about this on so many different shows, but regardless of what kind of math you're doing, it taxes working memory. I have to remember what I hear. I have auditory working memory. I have visual spatial working memory. So if I have trouble with spatial or visual skills, there's an issue there. So if I'm trying to solve 87 plus 65, some kids learn I'm going to do 80 plus 60. Then I still have 7 plus 5 to add. I have to hold all these numbers in separate places in my head, right? Mm-hmm. I'm drawing a picture of something that reminds me of the formula I do, and I'm remembering Dear Aunt Sally. How does that play out in this? You know, I have to remember, I'm remembering the number I said. I did 80 plus 60. That's 140. I'm holding 140 in my mind while I add 12 more, 140 plus 12. We use working memory when somebody tells us their phone number and our phone is like, come on, I typed the wrong number, and you're rehearsing the number in your head. That's working memory. But with math, you're having to remember sum means what? You know, the dividend, what does that mean? You have all of this math vocabulary. You have formulas. You have Dear Aunt Sally. You have your times tables. You have all of these different pieces that you're pulling from different parts of your brain, and you're manipulating and using them to solve this problem. It's a juggling act. And if kids don't have the basics, they're juggling too many balls and they start falling on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah. I never really analyzed it like this. This is fascinating.
So some things, if your kids have difficulty holding information in their head, knowing which information is relevant. Oh, I can pull this from long-term storage. I learned these times tables last year. I'm going to pull that out of my brain while I learn this new thing that I'm applying it to this year. If they don't know how the pieces go together, they know a lot of the individual pieces, but then they can't problem solve with it. This is very tied to reading, everything we do in life.
Yeah.
Here are some strategies to help until we get working memory stronger. This is one of our primary executive functions from which so many other things come. LiveScribe is a fantastic tool that records audio while it writes notes for you. So you usually need to get permission from the school. It might be part of a 504. Accommodations, modifications don't fix anything. We know that, but they help kids be successful. Can they have a copy of the teacher's notes? Sometimes those are already on Google Classroom or whatever platform your school uses. If you don't know, ask them if they have a place they post assignments or their notes. Can they have a note-taking buddy? And that way they can still take their own notes and get a copy of their buddies, and they're still taking notes even with LiveScribe. Then they compare that to what they have written, and then they can rewrite their notes and make sense of it and start using it in a meaningful way. I know it seems obvious to say calculator, but sometimes you have to ask for that. This is very appropriate for a dyscalculia or kids who truly do have a math calculation challenge. Can they take pictures of the chalkboard? Is that allowed? And then they can add that to their notes and start connecting the dots. There's a lot of research about drawing visuals of problems. If they're like a word problem, or it doesn't even have to be a word problem. And they start drawing it, especially if they like drawing. And that what they're doing is they're making it concrete. These foreign abstract words are becoming concrete, and then they can start wrapping their brain around the concept. Graphic organizers, I've shown several examples of this on other shows for reading. There are also graphic organizers for math. And they're the best site I have found for a variety of different, because there are different kinds are going to work for different brains. I gave you the link here, but if you can't copy that, take a screenshot. If you can't do that, just remember understood.org. And then in the search, you can put math graphic organizers and it will still get you there.
Perfect.
Graphic organizers help kids see the big picture and then details. And what do I already know about this? And start connecting the dots so they can create mental schemas. When I have categories of information, I'm not juggling as many balls. This one ball holds 4 facts, but I see how they go together. So now it's one ball. That is the key to connecting the dots in this cumulative math that they're facing.
I feel like this would be helpful too for parents, because like I run into the problem a lot where I was actually quite good at math, but they do it such a different way that he has learned a completely different way to do it than I know how to do it. And so I have trouble walking him through the steps. And so like if he had a graphic organizer where he was writing out the steps the way that he has learned to do it, I might be able to figure it out. But because I wasn't in the classroom, I just don't know.
100%. In fact, a lot of schools are getting away from math textbooks, much to the parent chagrin. So these really do help you see what they know, help you figure out what this process is they're doing, because it is completely different.
It's completely different.
And you can get on the same page with them and then be a better support for them.
Yeah.
And you can do an I do, you do, we do, you do kind of situation where once you see the process, you saw one, talk it out loud, have the, do one together and then have them do it. So you're growing their mastery on that.
I love that.
All right, we can move on. I'm sure nobody out there has kids who struggle with word problems. Yeah, I've been in so many people's existence.
Yes.
But word problems, this is application right here. But there is a 3-read approach I want to share with you. Okay, so on the right here, you see what the math word problem is. Javier buys 102 watermelons at the store. Each watermelon weighs 2,136 pounds. His truck bed has a maximum capacity of 1,200 pounds. How many pounds of watermelon did he buy? Will Javier be able to haul the watermelons home in one trip? So what's happening with a lot of kids when they're reading this? What on earth does this guy need 102 watermelons for? Why would he do that? Some kids may not like that. What's that name? I don't know how to pronounce that, especially if they're struggling readers, or it might just be a name they're not familiar with, right?
Yeah.
It could have the name of a foreign currency in there that they're not familiar with, and they get hung up on that. So getting rid of the distractions is letting them read it through one time and getting all those distractions out of the way. Let them ask themselves that. They're not thinking about math yet. Okay, step 2. Now that we got rid of the distractions, we are going to rename the words that are tripping them up. So there's nothing we love the word Javier, but if it's going to keep this child from solving a math problem, we want to get that out of the way. So a lot of students will rename the characters one of their friends' names. Bob. They know how to read and spell and say that. So that doesn't take any of my cognitive load. Maximum capacity, there's a language issue. Those are words beyond the vocabulary of this child, and they wouldn't be in this word problem if they weren't considered grade appropriate. So there's a clue too for you. It could be complex language. What's another way to say maximum capacity? It could be max weight, or the most weight it can hold is. You can work through definitions, but if your kids have difficulty learning definitions, the rule of thumb is to really work on one skill at a time. If you're working on math, don't necessarily try to grow their vocabulary that's not math vocabulary in that moment, because that will overwhelm them. So now I'm going to go through and change the words that I wasn't comfortable with. And then now I'm going to get to it. What are the details? What am I solving? Huge issue for a lot of kids with executive dysfunction, ADHD. And a lot of kids with social, emotional, behavioral issues have more issues with the big picture. Is there only one question to solve, or is there more than one? This question has 2. A lot of kids get counted off because they might rush through, be impulsive, miss details, and not notice that there are 2 questions that they need to answer. They could have answered both, but they didn't even notice that there were 2. I answered the question, I'm on to the next. That's really the same as skipping a question.
Yeah.
So, and then another really good thing, you can Google, there are so many math, I don't even want to call them cheat sheets because the word cheat, but that's just what they're called, where there are certain conversions, something that's appropriate for their grade. There can be ones that in math word problems, a lot of times kids don't know which operation they're supposed to do with these numbers. Am I supposed to add, subtract, multiply, divide? And so get them a table and help them learn that product, that's a hint about multiplication, subtraction, less than, fewer, and so on. And some kids, especially with language issues, might not know that multiply is the root word of multiplication, or divide is the root word of division. So even that word may not know it's called division. It's not called divide. They really may not have that cognitive flexibility. So when they see these words, it's a hint to them about which type of operation to do. It's a really good way to help them. But this 3-read approach, get rid of distractions, replace the words with different words that aren't going to trip them up, and then get to what am I solving, and teach them what words go with which type of operation.
Got it. That's I never thought about that, not knowing the difference between divide or division, and thinking about the 2 ways you say that. That's such a simple hack. Thank you.
One of the best ways to grow vocabulary, in 5th grade, students are expected to learn, they're exposed to 10,000 new words. The average student learns 8 to 10 new words a week. However, if you teach them morphology, and that is the parts of words, this is very evidence-based. For example, the word run, rerun, runner, running, etc. When they understand root word, and then they learn what prefixes are and what suffixes are, it vastly multiplies vocabulary. That is one of the quickest ways to grow vocabulary very, very quickly.
Yes.
But it gets in the way of math too.
Yeah. My sister's actually a 1st grade teacher. She's a huge science of reading advocate. We could probably talk about that offline sometime. Yeah.
Definitely. Yes. All right. And probably the thing that trips kids up the most is some form of fractions. And a lot of kids have difficulty with whole part relationships. If they only see the big picture and can't remember the details, then there's an issue. If they hone in on details and can't see the forest for the trees, there's an issue. So how am I going to learn whole part, right? Yeah. And then when you think about it, fractions are division. Fractions are the same as our decimals, percents, ratios, proportions. A lot of kids don't know that. Connect those dots for them. But I'm not going to go into a fraction lesson because I'm not a math teacher and I know my limitations. But these are from Adrienne Meldrum. She has been a math teacher for a long time. These 3 fraction rules, even if they don't make sense to you, and y'all are smarter than me, so they might, but even if they don't make sense to you, you talk about them with your kids who are in this space, it is going to exponentially improve their understanding of fractions. Any number written over itself is the same as a 1. So we know that 357 over 1 is 357, but so is 3x to the 2nd power over 3x to the 2nd power. Look how this simplifies it for them. And what you're doing is you're able to get to equivalent fractions so that a lot of kids know, if I could make sense of these and none of them were improper fractions, I know to multiply the numerators and multiply the denominators, but these denominators are different. We're showing them how to get them the same so they know what to do with them. Any number written over 1 doesn't change its value. 2x minus 12 over 1 is still 2x minus 12. Look how you're simplifying things. And if the product of 2 fractions is 1, they are reciprocals of each other. I have an example there. Those 3 fractions have turned a lot of students into math whizzes because they apply to tons of even advanced math when you're getting into trig and calculus and so forth. But look at that cartoon. To show you how well understood fractions, I only did half my homework. All right, smarty pants.
I love it.
Those are 3 things that even if they don't make complete sense to you, they may or they may not, they will probably mean something to your child. And I think the 3rd one is the toughest one, but it is a way of simplifying fractions, and they know how to get fractions to agree with one another so they know what to do with them. That's the short version. I could do a little better job than that, but it's...
No, I love it. This is all great.
All right. that is covering some of the top challenges from little ones through teens.
I love it. Heather, as always, great advice. If you are watching this video on the replay, drop your questions. You know, Heather is always so engaged. You can follow her, as you can see there, at The Hidden Churn. The Hidden Churn and Hidden Churn, as you can see. And we have got all these beautiful centers, including the Woodlands. So there's a brain balance center near you. Hop in for an assessment. Heather is heavily involved, and you will probably meet her. Thank you so much. Are we going to see you this week with Dr. Brian?
Yes, Thursday at 3:30.
Thursday at 3:30. All right. Well, we'll catch you guys next week. Ask your questions, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.